Welcome back. Democrats at odds on their minimum $3.5 trillion spending package. Two senators, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, have pushed back on the cost as lawmakers start to release drafts of segments of the legislation and how to pay for the spending. Joining me right now is New York Congressman, House Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committee member, and New York gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin. Congressman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. First, let's talk about where you are in terms of this spending package. We've been going through a lot of these offsets, whether it be higher taxes on the individual level, higher taxes for corporations, or new fees that Senator Wyden wants to perhaps talk about in terms of raising revenue. Do you think that the Democrats will be able to push this through?
Republicans are pretty united against the $3.5 trillion bill altogether. The question for the Democrats is whether or not they could put together the votes to get anything done. And as you pointed out pretty well on your program, you have a lot of proposals here to generate more revenue, the high-profile items, including increases on the corporate tax rate, increasing the individual tax rate, going after U.S. companies with foreign earnings, and whether or not the Democrats at the end of the day can put together the votes to get something done. It's tough with a 50-50 Senate. And if Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, others, want to hold the line, the votes just aren't there. On the House side, right now the big debate is whether or not the $3.5 trillion bill should be tied to the $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Right now, the House Democratic Caucus is split. You have most of the far left elements insisting that in order for them to vote for the $1.5 trillion bill, it has to be tied to the $3.5 trillion bill. And then you have a few moderate holdouts insisting that the $1.5 trillion bill be brought up separately. So that's what's going on right now on the House side. But there is going to be committee markups here starting now post Labor Day to mark up the $3.5 trillion bill. We'll see if we get over if they could get over the finish line. But right now the votes aren't there.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty extraordinary that we're talking about things like putting fees in place if CEOs make too much money, putting fees in place if companies have too big of a buyback plan, when we have so many crises happening across the country and the world. We still have Americans trying to get out of Afghanistan. The Taliban is pretty much holding the United States hostage as we speak. You've got a massive overflowing border with 1.5 million migrants being apprehended year to date. Tens of thousands of others, gotaways, that are now in the country. We don't know what they're doing. Not to mention the Afghan refugees also want to come to the country, and the Democrats want them to have green cards and make them legal. So, I mean, just the fact that you and your colleagues are discussing spending all this money and taxing everybody as much as you are, as opposed to focused on these crises, is quite extraordinary in my view.
You're right. And what some of these members of the Democratic caucus in the House are calling $3.5 trillion a floor. This isn't a ceiling. Rashida Tlaib is one member who serves on the House Financial Services Committee with me. She's referring to the $3.5 trillion number as a floor. There's a push for, as soon as you can get this several $trillion proposal over the finish line, the next day they're going to wake up, try to figure out how they can spend trillions of dollars more. It's sad, but the T, the B, the M of the trillion, billion, million for many members of Congress, they don't see the difference in life experience is signing one side of a check, not both. So that's concerning. The debt limit is also due. You pointed out the number of crises our country is facing right now, and really Congress should be working to tackle all of it. There's a Mark Twain quote: "Your life, liberty, and property are at risk when the legislature is in session." He's a famous New Yorker from Elmira, New York, and that quote has never been more apropos than right now, what we're living through here in this Congress. So it's important for the American public to be tuned in, to be speaking out, to be aware, because this is money we just don't have.
Well, let's point out the fact that in the Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders budget, you've got an increase in spending of 22% at the EPA, but not a dime increase in spending of Homeland Security, no money for the border, and not a dime of increase in defense spending. It's supposed to be up 1.7% in his budget, but that's actually a negative. It's a decline when you consider inflation. So no spending on defense, even as our adversaries are rising. Let's look at New York for a second, Congressman, because Kathy Hochul, now her third week as New York governor, at a news conference yesterday, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg offered her some advice as she finishes out Cuomo's term. Listen to this.
I think what the governor has to do is reach out to everybody, not try to be everybody's friend, not try to give everybody everything they want. He's got to be a leader rather than a panderer.
So how's she doing, Congressman? Governor Hochul has said she plans to run in the state's 2022 race, opposing your run.
The problem thus far is that she's trying to change her reputation. In the House, she was known as more of a moderate member. We've been through this before with Kirsten Gillibrand. She was known in the House as a moderate, and then she got appointed to a Senate seat, and you start thinking about the Democratic Party primary base. That's why you saw Governor Hochul pick Brian Benjamin, state senator, as her lieutenant governor. He is taking office here today as the lieutenant governor. He's picked because of his champion of the defund the police movement and that lack of support of law enforcement. She has kept on the health commissioner, Howard Zucker. That list goes on, extending the eviction moratorium and more. Where she's trying to appease the far left of her party. It's a push that is not in the best interests of the state. I think actually the mayor's advice should be well taken. Don't try to be all things to all people. The state needs saving, and pandering the far left isn't going to do it.
Well, we saw that with Joe Biden as well throughout the campaign. He's moderate this, he's moderate that. Well, he's not moderate at all. I mean, we've seen who Joe Biden is. By the way, yesterday, Kathy Hochul signed a bill into law that will ban gasoline-powered vehicles in New York. Are you in on that? That she says that begins, the ban will begin by 2035. Real quick, Congressman, before we go.
No, absolutely not. Now they're talking about increasing gas, 55 cents a gallon, propane, natural gas, home heating oil.
Okay.
We just can't afford this.
Congressman, good to see you. Thank you, Zeldin.